Welcome everybody to Homegrown Learning's podcasts, and today I'm really grateful that I've got a guest with me. We're not going to name our guest today because she'd rather not be identified, just because of the kind of content that she might be covering during our session. So I'm really grateful to hear her story. We were chatting the other day and she was telling me about her experience in school and kind of how that led to her deciding to home educate her children. So she's a mum of two and is a real newbie to home educating. So we're really grateful to have her here and welcome her into the home education community. So the reason that I feel like this story is really helpful to home educators is because I think particularly when you're at that stage of the journey where you're getting that gut feeling that things just don't feel quite right. Maybe your child's not happy, or maybe it's actually that the things that are happening in school are sort of rubbing up against you, making you feel a bit prickly. And I think it's really great to hear some of these stories, because it reinforces those feelings and helps parents to think that it isn't just them, that this is what is happening, and also to give them the opportunity to potentially try something else. So let's get going, and let's start by asking you if you could just share with us how you came to making that decision that you wanted to home educate.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. It was a tricky one for us. I had never even remotely considered home education when it came to my daughter starting school. I knew it was a thing we had to do, and just had to suck it up and accept it. And she started school. I always thought home education was just for hippies. I thought it was I thought I would never be able to teach every subject under the sun. So it was just like, didn't even think of it. My little one started school. I started work at the same school as a teaching assistant at the same time. One was really happy at school, but it was the things that I saw in the school, and this is a good school with a good reputation and everyone always said lovely things about it. But the things I thought I saw within the school, I just thought, this is not what I want for my child. I don't want this for her learning. I don't want this for her education. I don't want this for her childhood. I just wanted more. And I also thought that I recalled my own experience of school and recalled the constant pressures of timetables and homework and essays and exams and peer pressures. And peer pressures are so much worse now than they were when I was younger. And I just thought, I don't want this for my child. And I was in a very lucky position where, through multiple circumstances, including maternity leave, illness, my change of occupation when I started being a TA, I wasn't the main breadwinner. And I was lucky that that was the case, and we could just about hopefully scrape by with me not working. And we've actually knocked through our downstairs spare room into our garage, so we now have an annex which is being rented out, which means that's kind of supplementing our income. And it was a tough decision because my little one was happy. She's the kind of child who would, what educators would say is, thrive at school, and in that sense of thriving mean do well in everything. But I didn't want her to just do well in everything and be the child that was in the top set for everything or do well in her SATs. I wanted her to thrive in the sense of loving life, becoming a great character with great values, and really continue to be herself and do the things that she loves.
Wow, it just my arms have gone all goosebumpy, because it is true, isn't it? You kind of, it's that, you know, everybody, it's wanting more than just having a good child who's going to work hard and just and please all the teachers and get all the grades. And yeah, and so your experience in school you know, you had that unique perspective of being in the classroom. What made you want to work in a school? What made you change your job role and get a job in a school?
It was multifold, really. It was something that I'd wanted to do for a long time, but knew it would involve a pay cut.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so we had to be in a position to be able to do that. Um, when my little one started school, I wanted to be there for her at weekends. I wanted to be able to drop her off, and I wanted to pick her up. I didn't want her to be in
Yeah.
wraparound. I wanted to maximize our time with her. And so starting work in a school as a TA with no homework, you know, no prep, no marking, would allow me to do that. And
Hmm.
getting a job at the same school as her again meant there was no travel time. I didn't have to
Hmm.
drop her off early, pick her up early, or anything. Sorry, pick her up late or anything like that. I thought that being in the school would help her have a bit more of a face, a bit more of a voice in the school if she was known as that, you know, that teaching
Yes.
assistant daughter. I
Hmm.
thought it would be great to be part of the community. If, you know, we were going to be in the school, if you include my youngest as well, we'd be part of the school for 10 years. I
Yeah.
wanted to be part of a community. But most of all, I wanted to do a job where I helped people. I used to be a journalist. I
Okay.
was a sports journalist. I wasn't an investigative journalist. I didn't have the guts to go exposing, you
Yeah.
know, wrongs or things like that. I wanted to do a job that really helped people and made a difference to people and helped children who struggled to learn. I wanted to help them learn. Help children who didn't enjoy school. I wanted to help them enjoy school, and so that's how I ended up where I was.
Wow. Wow. And so when you got your job in school, um, how did that sort of thought that all these things that you've just told us, how did that correlate to actually being in school and working in school for you?
In terms of what I saw in the school that made me consider home education, there was multiple things really.
Mm.
Um, I quickly realised that for bright children there would be no one-to-one help.
Mm.
Any things that they were finding difficult or missing or not quite getting, that would very rarely be picked up and supported because there is no
Yeah.
time to do that.
Hmm.
I also recognise that for bright children, perhaps they weren't being challenged as much as they could be. But I
Yeah.
know that, again, for teachers, they don't have all the time in the world
No,
to
they
provide
don't.
a separate lesson for everybody.
No.
Um, I was shocked by the lack of resources. If it
Mm.
was the wrong time of year and they'd run out of glues,
Mm.
for example, or whiteboard pens, they couldn't buy any more glues or whiteboard pens because it was the wrong time in the financial year. And children were like scraping the glue out of the end of the glue sticks or
Mm.
sharing one glue between a class of 30. And I was like, this is crazy. We could just go and buy glues if we were at home.
Yeah.
I was shocked by the amount of computer time they had and the computer time which wasn't very well policed, and they had a lot of freedom to look at stuff that they shouldn't be looking at when they were supposed to be doing their work. Um, Behavior, I was quite disappointed at. I kind of pictured my daughter in a classroom with these behavior issues, and I just thought I would be
Mm.
letting her down if I sent her into an environment like this 5 days a week.
Mm.
It's not fair on her.
Yeah.
Um, the work itself I found was quite stale, and I know that they've got to get stuff done. They've got to tick things off for Ofsted and things, but there was
Yeah.
a lot of worksheets. It was all indoors. It was there was so little outside the classroom. There was so little going on outside the school, and there were also the lessons they were learning. A lot of them I found was stuff that we just have conversations about at home.
Yeah.
You know, they were
Mm.
learning about
Mm.
different types of families in year 3, and I was like, well, we've talked about this
Mm.
before my little one started school. They were talking about how shadows were made, and I was like, this is in year 6, and I'm like, well, I
Mm.
think my 3-year-old knows this. And I was like, well, we don't need to be sitting down and having a formal lesson to cover most of this stuff. We can just learn it by existing in the world together.
Yeah.
um that was really hard. There was I felt like there was a lot of time put on exam prep. So preparing for stats, for example. I was like, well, they're spending several weeks learning how to pass an exam, and is this really helpful for a child? Is this really going to better them as a child? Is it really going to help their education? And I also was really shocked by how much what they did was dictated by doing what they needed to do to impress or keep Ofsted happy, rather than what would be best for the children. And they'd have to have a learning objective at the top of each lesson. And if they hadn't put it in at the end of the half term, they'd have to go back and make sure they stuck all the learning objectives in. And I knew that it wasn't to help the children, it was so that when an Ofsted inspector came round, they'd go through the books and say, oh yes, they've done that, tick, tick, tick. And teachers having to take a drama lesson is not enough to have a drama lesson. They'd have to have photos of the drama lesson, and that would have to be stuck in their books. And I was like, teachers are wasting their time doing this. I know they have to do it, it's not their fault, but I just thought this time management is it's not fair, and it's not the best thing for the children. And I was also finding that there was so much dead time in school that it was not efficient. And I thought, if we did this at home, we could get this done in maybe 10 minutes and then go and have some fun. And then I just found that I really realized, I think the overall thing was how limited learning in schools is. It's limited by the size of the class, the ability of the children in the class, the resources the school has, the space in the classroom, the space within the perimeter fence of the school, the health and safety, the time in the day, the length of the lessons before break time and things. It was just limited to the structure of the school environment and the time in the school. And I was like, these obviously will have financial constraints at home, but if we need a glue, we can go and buy a glue. And I just thought we would have all the time, and we'd have all the space, as far as we can afford the petrol in Cornwall, and it could just be so much bigger and so much more unlimited, I think.
Oh, I can so resonate. And I mean, having been a head teacher myself, that was my school as well, which kind of makes you feel sad. And I think actually we're not talking about this isn't school's fault, this isn't teachers' fault, this is actually a system that's been set by government, led by inspections, and those are all the things that make schools have to have this rigid structure. I mean, sticking objectives into books is such a ridiculous waste of time, teachers' time, to either photocopy all those objectives and hand them out to the children, and then they stick them in. I love the bit where you said about, talking about shadows or families, or, and actually that's so true in life at home. There's so much conversation, so much rich conversation that that your children, without having to then go, oh, we've just talked about shadows, right, now you need to draw a picture of a shadow and label and show the sun and label how it's doing, and that will confirm that I know about shadows. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I think there's lots of things. It comes down to a lack of sort of adults' trust in children and what they're capable of. And I think, I mean, I can talk for myself as a head teacher. It wasn't until I came out of the system and reflected back and spent time learning with my own children that I was like, oh my gosh, this system could be so different. And I'm not against schools. I think and I think they're incredible places. The community that can come from being part of a school is amazing. But actually, until government are able to sort of, it's not that they don't recognize it, because there's so many professionals, so many people out there campaigning against the system and providing you know, valuable research. I mean, just talking about behavior, you know, do you think that those children where the behavior was poor, do you think it was do you think it was because those children were bored in the lessons? Were they you know, were they not motivated? I mean, the learning, like you said, was stale. It doesn't reflect real life learning, and so does that make it irrelevant and boring for children? Or were those children, do you think, had additional needs that maybe weren't identified and weren't well supported? Because like you say, a teacher with 30 children in the class, some who are probably more able, gifted in particular subjects, and then other children who just generally need help, maybe lack confidence, and then you've got behaviour children, just catering for all those needs, sometimes without a teaching assistant, is kind of impossible. What do you think was the
My take on it was down, this is just my take on it, it was more down to the children's background, and I felt like the behavior was poor because it was important to the children to this is really tricky, really tricky question. I felt like the children whose behavior was poor in the class were the children who had more of an attachment to their peers than they did have an attachment to perhaps their families at home. And I felt like for them, they came into school to you know, impress their peers. They were, and because of that, they were pushing against the teacher. They were pushing against any kind of adult. Whereas children who perhaps still had a really good attachment to adults at home had more respect for the adults in the school, and also had the own sense of self-worth and self-esteem to not have to play up.
It's interesting, isn't it?
To control their own behaviors. That was kind of the way I saw it.
I think it's really interesting because, like, is it Dr. Gabor Mate? He talks about children up until the age of 8. Actually, all they need is a strong family surrounding to be able to learn, you know, social, have the right social experiences and to feel good and confident in who they are. And then it's beyond the age of 8 where they're looking for alternative adults, but actually that needing of peers doesn't need to happen until later on. And actually, if you think about it, it makes sense, doesn't it, that children, you know, if they come into school and they are suddenly more reliant on their peers, those peers of the same age have no life experiences to be able to support other children. So they're all of this like sort of following that kind of doesn't help them. What else was I going to say when you made a point then as well? I think the other thing also though is I think there are a lot of children in school who you know, totally the other way. There's a lot of children in school who are well behaved and doing all of those things because there is too much control over their, like, how they should behave. So it is a subject, you know, be a really great subject to kind of debate, but you know, actually those children sitting in the classroom being well behaved, sitting there, you know, perhaps a bit meek and just doing what they're told, does that represent a child who is essentially going to be a lifelong learner? Or is that child, because they're being well behaved and meek and doing what they're told, are they going to need that as an adult to be, you know, to be told all the time what to do, to need rewards, to know that they've done something good? So it's a really debatable kind of topic, but I know I just wanted to ask that because lots of teacher friends of mine are saying that, you know, behavior is bad, but the majority of that seems to stem around children with additional needs not being supported. but then also alongside that is the fact that the education system has got more and more controlling. So those children who need different ways of learning, so need to be visual, need to be more kinesthetic, need to do things more, can't cope with the sitting still, can't cope with the pace of I mean, it was interesting you talking about the sort of how much time is wasted. And I was reading a really great report the other day about how with the school system like it is, because it's done at such a pace and it's done with like an outcome, like we're going to do a math times table test. Actually, we're not teaching children to take time to explore, discover, keeping things open-ended, because basically entrepreneurs, innovative people don't just come to a decision about something straight away. They will contemplate something, work something through, make a mistake, go back to it, change bits, and we're not giving children enough free time, free space to explore that. So that was quite interesting. Yeah, and it's fascinating. It is fascinating being in school from a parent's perspective, going in and being on the other side of the fence. And I don't think teachers would disagree really with anything you said in terms of, it is so ridiculous that the finance dictates what you can have in the classroom. I mean, there does need to be a budget obviously for the year. We've got this amount, but actually those essential resources, I think a lot of parents don't know how under-resourced schools are.
I think at one point there was a list of things we needed to buy for next year, and one of them was dictionaries. And I was like, but this is a school. Dictionaries don't disappear or disintegrate. Why are there no dictionaries? There was 8 dictionaries for a class of 30. And it just because of finances, there weren't enough dictionaries for the children, and they were very rarely used. And I have spoken to a lot of teachers talking about our own experiences, thinking that I would be judged and they would, they'd be really disparaging about my choice, thinking, you think you can do my job better than me.
Yeah.
But no one has said that. And everyone has said, you're making a great choice. You're going to have a great time. And the support from actual teachers and to kind of reinforce my choice has been amazing.
Yeah, it's funny though, because everyone said to me, oh, you're likewise, you're going to have an amazing, and then you'll be all right because you're a head teacher, so you'll know exactly what you're doing. But actually I've my whole method of how we learn and things at home is totally different and uses a totally different set of skills than I used in the classroom. I mean, actually my skills as a head teacher and in the classroom were, number one, about behavior management. You've got 30 children, you've got to keep them all occupied during this next hour. So that was, number one, that's how teachers get educated in terms of teacher training. How are you going to cater for 30 children? So I think there's so many things that I definitely learned. But I think the key thing, and why teachers probably are more supportive now. I mean, when people, I think in my 21 years in education, I only have one family that left to home educate, and I remember thinking a bit the same as you, hippies and all of that, and oh my gosh, I should eat my words, because that is not the case. People are choosing left, right and center, all sorts of people from all sorts of background, single parents, parents are choosing to do it for a whole variety of reasons, and and they're not all people that have lots of money and that can afford to do it. People are, like you say, you've had to rethink how you can bring in another income to make ends meet. So it's not like that. I guess the other thing that you may have seen in school is kind of that sort of lack of being able to see children's kind of interests flourish. What was was that something that kind of struck you, or?
Yeah, hugely. I kind of found that I hardly knew anything about any of the children in that class after a year. I didn't know what interested them. I didn't know what really sparked them. I didn't know what they were doing outside of school. And that I found that really, really hard. And thinking about my own child becoming, another faceless sausage coming out the sausage factory that isn't an individual by the end of it. And I looked at the curriculum and I just found it so arbitrary. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but why learn about Mayans, who before that time I'd never even heard of Mayans? Why learn about, at the age of 36, why learn about Mayans in year 5? And how's that going to really help their futures? Why learn about, this in whatever year? And how's that going to help their futures? Why not, the children could not ask questions, because if 30 children had a question about something they were learning, you would never finish the lesson.
No.
So you couldn't take it further. You couldn't take it in a different direction. And I looked at some particular children, neurodiverse children who really, really did not like school. But if you gave them something they were interested in, then they would just talk with the most, with excitement and produce beautiful work. And that's how children remember stuff as well, is if they really love it.
Yeah.
I knew that my child had so many of her own interests, so many things she wanted to do, but I did not have the time to support her in that. I didn't want to be the mum that gave her extra work to do when she got home from school. That's not what I wanted for her. And living in Cornwall, there's so much culture, so much history that is really relevant to her heritage and the things that she sees around her. I was like, well, why aren't we learning about that instead? And there were children at school who so not just different interests, but different personalities, different ways of learning. And like, this system is not designed for people, for everybody. It's designed for an average few across the middle kind of thing. And seeing children who had autism, who had these real interests, for example, in engineering, I'm like, he's never going to do real engineering in primary school.
I think that's the thing that struck me most, is that school is about getting children across a broad curriculum to all reach a level. But actually life isn't like that. Like you talk about being a journalist, so obviously literacy and that side would be a strength of yours, but that child that's interested in engineering, obviously maths and science is going to be more. And actually we're naturally like that, really. There's not many people who are across the board incredible at everything and passionate about everything. And I think that's why I wanted to ask that, because the thing that struck me when I started home educating was just that how personal my children's journeys are, around their interests. I mean, anything that you look at is kind of cross-curricular, isn't it? Any kind of learning, you're I don't know, you're talking about shadows, you're talking about the sun, you're talking about science, you're using vocabulary, you're talking about maths because of times of day. It's all so cross-curricular. And I think the fact that schools sort of separate all their subjects, well, they have to, it's not their fault, they probably don't want to, but it's it's a way of ticking boxes. And like you say, like learning about periods of time or things like that, that's all very well if children are interested. I used to ask the children at the beginning of a topic, like, what do you want to know? The things they wanted to know were, how did they go to the toilet?
Yes.
It's all that like gruesome lovely stuff, not the sort of, why did that war happen, what that wasn't where they were at. And I just think, but actually if I just enabled the learning to just be about what the children wanted to know, I wouldn't have covered what was in the national curriculum. So I think the personalised learning journey doesn't mean that they're not going to get access to all areas of the curriculum, but it does mean that they are going to be motivated to learn, because they are interested in what they're learning. And I think the role of the adult then becomes the facilitator. You know, your child's interested in such and such, then you make it your business to kind of expand that by, you know, offering to take them to this museum, or offering to you know, get these books out, or offering to go and talk to somebody in the community that you know already does that job. You know, it is really, really hard. I think the thing that does sadden me with schools is that the one area of schooling that is better than all the rest is the early years curriculum, the early years, where everything is child led, and everything is, you know, across age phases. You
Yeah,
know,
I agree.
how unnatural is it in their life that they have to continue learning for 12 plus years in their own year group, you know?
Yeah, you can only get a promotion when you hit 45,
Yeah,
that sort of
yeah,
thing. I would
ridiculous.
totally agree. My daughter's experience in reception, she did 1 year of school, was absolutely brilliant. They were outdoors, it was completely child led. There
Hmm.
was no mass curriculum. It all depended on what they were doing, whether they were setting up a shop or, you know, or something like that. And I really wish it would continue like that beyond the reception
You know,
class.
just that opportunity. I can see them now out in the sand, you know, with all with the water, and you know, their inquisitive nature, and they're thinking about the water drops and how, you know, they start to pour it into the little kind of funnels and see how fast the ball goes, and there's no time pressures on them, there's no outcome pressures, it's pure curiosity and child-led interest. And you know, that does work, and that could happen throughout the whole education system, but it would mean taking away the outcomes of Ofsted and enabling each child to be tracked individually on their personal learning journey, you know.
Yeah. I felt like learning, it was all about learning as quickly as possible. So for example, with phonics, with learning to read, they're like, this is a great program, phonics program, because they learn to read quicker
Yes.
than they did with the last one. I'm like, yes, but she comes home and refuses to read because she's
Yeah.
already read that book 3 times at school, and you want her to read it 3 more times at home.
Yeah.
And my daughter does not like reading, and so that's something that we've got to work on. Is
Mm.
you know, she loves stories, she absolutely loves stories, but to her, reading is still a chore.
Yeah, it's a chore. Same with my son. He read, you know, really well, did well on his phonics test in school, and then came out of school and decided he wasn't going to read anymore because he wasn't going to be dictated to about reading. And it took 3 years before he then picked up, you know, he again, we listened to audios, I read to them all the time, but it took 3 years for him to then go, actually, I'm going to read a book to myself, for myself, and actually I like these kind of books. I don't like storybooks, but I really love factual books, and I'm going to just focus. And actually, you know, even that in itself, I'm the same. I love cookery books, I love books about things, but I don't actually love getting a book, you know, a storybook, going on holiday with you know, a book and reading a story. It doesn't. But I can take you know, any kind of non-fiction book with me, and I love it. So, you know, but that hasn't impacted me as an adult. It's just about knowing what you like, and then when you know what you like and what you're interested in, that kind of that spreads. But let's go on to just talking about, so obviously your experience in school led you to your pathway of home educating. What when you and your partner, you know, made that decision, what what were the obstacles that you had to work through, do you think?
Um, the obstacles in terms of between me and my husband, I was like fully on board with it, and rather scared, but fully on board with the idea of
Sure.
home education. The obstacles were was really socialization. How is
Yeah,
she going to, you know, so how is she going to maintain, you know, a social life?
yeah,
And the other one was, how is she going to come into contact with those people who we wouldn't ordinarily choose to spend time with?
yeah,
in the workplace, there will be difficult people, there will be people with different personalities, and you have to learn to manage that. And he was like,
Yeah.
well, how are we going to get her into that kind of position? So we bandied around some ideas about that, and we've got a long time to give her
Yes, you have.
voluntary roles, work experience, sports
Hmm.
clubs. She's in a football club, so
Even just home ed groups, that
yeah,
there's all
yeah.
walks of life, and yeah.
Yeah, and then we originally asked to go to do flexi schooling, and we tried really, really hard to get a flexi schooling arrangement. We put in hours of time producing a proposal and chatting to the head, and it just went nowhere. So we were left to go, are we going to jump off this home education cliff, or are we going to go with the safe option? And then for us, I think the obstacle with the finances was sorted by just really, really chance and luck that we had just knocked through our kitchen into the garage. So that's ticked
Yeah.
off just about being able to pay the bills with everything going through the roof. There is also the obstacle of having a small child, is like
Yeah,
a
mixed
smaller child,
age.
a very nearly 3-year-old, and that's the current obstacle that I'm trying to work through and go, well, how can I keep him busy? How can I make sure that he doesn't get forgotten in all of this? As him,
Hmm.
I don't want him to be the extra child who's just there. This needs to be a homeschool for 2 children, not a homeschool for 1 child and another one who's just getting in the way.
Yeah.
So at the moment,
Yeah.
I'm kind of having to work around that and be flexible and flexible about when I do the small pockets of more formal stuff with my
Hmm.
daughter, where we do the more, those more formal one-to-one kind of learning sessions. But we're building on it, and I'm learning. But the good thing is I sit here and I go, it's okay, we have time, because I know that if she were in
Yeah.
school, if she were in school, if we do half of what I plan to do, we will still be doing more than what they're doing in school.
Mm.
And we have time, because she doesn't have to be at this level by this age, because she's not going to be letting anybody down. She's not
No.
going to be missing any marks or anything like that. And we've got time to catch up with these things. And it's that's the hardest thing, is having a smaller child. If it
Yeah.
were the other way around, and I was teaching, my son were 5 and my daughter were 3,
Mm.
um, it would be fine, because she would happily sit and colour or write or draw or create things for hours on end with no intervention. But my son
Yeah.
is not like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. So many parents talk about that mixed age group, and I've got it with my children as well, 11 and 9, and now getting to the point where with groups where we used to go to all the same groups, and now my 11-year-old does not want to be part of certain groups because his interests are X, Y, and Z, and actually they no longer, that those groups no longer meet his needs. And I think that is the thing about home educating, that it is a constant journey. It's an ebb and a flow. It's never just, oh, here we are, this is our routine, this is what we just do all the time. It changes, and actually it's a beautiful thing, because in life, we change all the time, don't we? Our interests, you go from being a single person to potentially being married to then having children, and you have to adjust, and it's the same with children and their development. But it is hard. It's, I think since the pandemic, people have actually realized that home educating is not easy. It is a constant flow, a constant trying to keep everyone, keep everyone happy, but also um, make sure that, and that includes yourself. And I think I was going to ask you, but like, I know myself, I forgot about myself when I started, and I was just like, everything was about the children. And then after a year, I kind of burnt out and crashed out. It was not pretty. And realized that was because we didn't have external help. and actually I wasn't making time for myself. So now, we put those things in place and things are a lot better, but it's a sort of self discovery journey, and a kind of whole family journey. So
Yeah.
yeah, what so you sound like you kind of went into it with a good understanding. I mean, it's great. It's also great that your partner came on board, and that I talk to so many parents, and my own husband would also agree that he was not on board. He thought it was just going to be a year, thought that they would go back into school. He didn't want them to be different to any other children. And it's like, we're now 6 years on, and he can see that actually our children are no different to any other children. They're happy to, be in the park and suddenly start chatting and making friends with people. So it's again, that can be a real obstacle for parents. And there's always, those highs and lows of where, I think one partner might come in and go, "Well, they don't look like they're doing anything. They haven't been doing anything all day." And the other partner's kind of got to do that. Well, no, actually, look, they might not be, sort of, because we are, as a generation, are so used to that kind of, we went to school, we sat down, we learned, then we went home and we played for a bit. And so parents of our kind of generation can cope with children when it looks like they're just having a little play, but then what they're doing the rest of the time, and that without really seeing how much learning is going on through their play as well. So yeah, that's another thing. So what advice have you got? Any advice so far on your journey that you would give to other parents thinking about home educating, or feeling like currently what they're doing is not right for either them or the children?
I mm, I think it would probably be to go with your gut instinct.
Mm,
I think so many times in life, I certainly, and I know lots of other people would ignore their gut instinct because they feel like it's not what other people expect them to do, or
yeah.
other people think they should do. It takes a lot of guts and a lot of courage to home educate, because
Mm.
potentially, if you're pulling someone out of school, if you're leaving your job in the school,
Yeah.
like we've both done,
Yeah.
like, what will people think? What will people think? What will our family think?
Mm.
Um, and just go with your gut instinct, really. And the other thing would be to prepare to be very flexible in your day. And
Yes.
yeah, because I
Yeah.
think it's really important to have a routine and a rhythm.
Mm.
But if you stick to that rigidly, to your routine and rhythm,
Mm.
then you are at risk of just doing school at home, which means you must start this lesson here and finish this lesson here. And
Mm.
if something needs to take longer than it should, and if something needs to finish sooner and move on, then you should be able to do that. So
Yeah. And like you
routine
said,
is
you said, sorry to interrupt, you said earlier on about that where children haven't got things in lessons, and then the lessons have moved on, you're on to something else, and they miss out on sort of really grasping things, which actually is why this system fails a third of our children, because it moves so fast, it doesn't allow for, like you're saying, you could be sat with your child working on some fractions or doing whatever. You sound like you're still doing the national, some of the national curriculum stuff. So if you're doing fractions, for example, and maybe your child's really not getting it, and you're either thinking, actually it's not working today, I'm going to leave this and we're going to start again tomorrow, or you think, oh, actually I know, I've got a flipping pizza for lunch. I'm gonna let's actually we'll cook the pizza. We'll leave this now, but I'll come back to it at lunchtime. We'll get the pizza and we'll actually cut it in half, and she can see the two halves. And
exactly, yeah,
and that's what makes it so rich and real.
yeah.
So
At the moment, I am using a, the national curriculum as a guide,
yeah.
and it's kind of like, I don't want to forget to do something, and it's a bit of a prompt to go, okay, yes, we could be learning this now, and I'll kind of take it and I'll do it at whatever pace is best for her, and I'll do it
Hmm.
in whatever way is best for her, and I'll let it take as long as it needs to. I was
Mm,
seeing children in year 6 at school who could not tell the time
mm,
because the everything had moved on and no one had said, you can't quite tell the time yet, let
Yeah.
me take you out and
Mm.
give you a bit longer on that. So for me, the national curriculum is still there as a safety net because we're brand new, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's still scary to think, if this doesn't work and she doesn't learn anything, and I am
Mm.
confident that she's going to learn, because I look at the national curriculum and
Yeah.
thinking she will be fine, we can cover that, that's not a problem. But it's
Yeah.
there kind of like, oh, I must remember to teach her that. But it's working really well because she's really into maths.
Yeah.
And
And there's no, you've got to, you
yeah,
know, I think there's no judgment on how people home educate. I don't think you'll ever see two homeschool families doing it exactly the same way. And you know, I think particularly when you're at the beginning of your journey, you are going to explore things. You know, I schooled at home for 6 months. It didn't work at all. I tried other things. I totally unschooled for kind of a year, and then we introduced some, just, you know, a few core skills. So we do a tiny bit of maths and a tiny bit of writing each day, you know, not more than 20 minutes each, and everything else is child led. And you got to get your own confidence, but also as you do it, you start to question, like I would question, you know, prime numbers. I said to my husband, prime numbers, you ever use prime numbers in your life? And he's like, no. And I was like, do you know what it is? You know, my husband's got a great job, but no, doesn't know what prime numbers are. Has it impacted him? And so sometimes it's like, oh, you know, you can have the national curriculum as a structure, but actually, you know, you will inevitably end up focusing on the real life learning, the things that, you know, the
yeah,
collaborating, the all of that lovely stuff that you want you've talked about wanting your child to do. So um um I think that has kind of answered, well, we've asked most of our questions, because you've talked about how your, you know, how homeschool is going. Have you managed to find any community yet?
we've done one thing with other homeschool people. We went to a Pizza Express workshop and
Oh,
met some
cool.
really lovely families.
Oh.
And I'm kind of like keeping an eye on the Facebook groups.
Mm,
I don't want to put my daughter into something and then pull her out again. So I'm
no.
just kind of assessing what's out there before we jump into something. But I
Yeah.
know that community is going to be really important to us, and there are other home educators where we live. So
Yeah, and I know where you live, and I know there is a great, you're very close to some bigger communities, whereas us down here, right in the very tip of Cornwall, it's harder. But I also you know that with groups, so we started going to groups quite early on, and some of those we've got great friendships and we're still really great friends with. Some groups don't work out for various reasons, like your children's interests, and again, that is something that doesn't have to remain the same. And you know, but I think, you know, as I've talked about earlier on, like what's helpful for new home educators is as a parent, you have to work really hard to give your child opportunities to make friends, because actually groups change, your children's friendships change, and you haven't, you know, like unlike in school where you've got 30 children plus the class above and the class below, and there's a bit more choice, although, you know, debatably that can also be quite tricky. But I think particularly as children go into their kind of teens, so I've got lots and lots of friends who've got children who like had one or two really close friends, and then one goes off world schooling, the other one is, you know, either moved up country or is having, you know, their own little issues and doesn't want to be quite social at the moment, and then they're left on their own. So it is something that you really have to work hard at, and I found that going to more things together and exploring those and making those connections has been quite exhausting, but has also something I can see is really important to help my children. I mean, my children have got friends from being in school, and they've got lots of cousins and things, but I, you know, from the community I'm with, that can be quite difficult. And I think from an adult's perspective as well, it's really important to make sure that you've got some community, because you know it is hard being with your children all the time, and you do go through periods where you think this is working really well, and then you go through periods and you think, oh, what am I doing, you know, maybe feel a bit more vulnerable. And just meeting with those people who've maybe experienced a bit more or on the same journey is kind of, has been really helpful for me anyway. So yeah.
I think on that point, homeschooling has actually played into our hands a bit more, because as a family, we really valued our family time.
Yeah.
And I found that I was holding my daughter back from doing some of the clubs and social groups that she wanted to do, because I wanted to be with her. As a family. Sorry, I've got a cough coming.
It's okay.
And I found that at weekends, we were saying no to a lot of social things as a family, because we wanted to have family time.
Yeah.
So now what I found is we have more family time. The whole week is family time. I know my husband is working, but
yeah.
if my daughter wants to go to football club and a performing arts club, when she already does swimming, surf club, and what else is she doing? Just that. But I was like, well, that's fine, because you've been with us all day, so go and do whatever clubs you want to do. And at weekends, because we are prioritizing her spending time with other children, we're meeting up with families more. And because we're meeting up with families more at weekends, where we used to just keep ourselves to ourselves as a family of 4, we're getting to see our friends more, because our friends have got small children, and that's, you know, our friends are the parents of our children's friends. So actually that is working better for us, and I feel like we are more socialized, and I don't feel guilty anymore about taking time to do something for myself, because I've spent all week with my children. Whereas at weekends or in the evening, I wouldn't want to miss tea time or bedtime, because I'm like, this is it's too precious. And I'd feel guilty if I went, you know, spent a couple of hours going to do some exercise or something on a weekend. But now I'm like, no, I've had a great week with my kids. I feel really connected to my kids. I'm going to do this for me, and I'm free to do that. I'm not bound by this guilt that we've only got 2 days together before they go back to school.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally resonate with that. And and we do like a little weekly calendar, or we do a little weekly so on a Sunday we all sit down and go, what do we want from the next week? And we make sure that each one of us has got doing something that we really want to do, and that we've got time, like I've got time with each of my children, special time to help them, but they've also got special time with my husband. My husband's doing something he really wants to do. And I think, you know, that's really important, that your children see that you value yourself and the things that you're interested in. And actually, by you showing that you've got passions and you're doing things that you love, helps for them to see, oh, well, you know, it's good for me, you know, I can do those things. You're kind of leading that, you're modeling that. I think it's really, really healthy. So well done for getting you sound like you're well on with the journey.
I'm loving it. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. But what I don't want is for everyone to go, oh, you're loving it, but what about the children?
Yeah, well, you know, and that is another, you know, another key thing. I know some children who, you know, get so far along the journey. That's why I was talking about friends, because actually one of the things seems to be for home educating children is that kind of feeling of not having enough friends, and they go to school because they want that from school. They often end up coming back out to home educate, because they realize that actually school itself is not social. You get very, very short playtime. By the time you've had your lunch, it's another very short playtime. And it doesn't actually enable you the time that you think you would have to be with your friends. But you know, that it is important. I mean, we just we let our son, not let our son, we asked our son if he wanted to go and look at secondary schools, to make sure that it wasn't just driven by our own kind of needs and wants. And he actually did go around and he looked, but he was in total shock. He loved like the D&T, but he was in total shock that you couldn't choose to do that and do it like all day or all afternoon, that you only got like one lesson every every week for 6 weeks, and then you don't get it again until the following year. So it was that immediately kind of put him off. But yeah, it's really good to listen to your children and find out what they want. And but it sounds like your children are going to love home educating. So I'm really pleased for you, and I'm really grateful that you've shared your journey, your perspective on kind of the other side, because I think that is, you know, what parents don't realize. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that are, you know, are questioning the system. You know, actually, just looking at the stats, I think when I started home educating, there was 65,000 home educating. 2 years ago, there were 85,000. There's now likely, you know, definitely more than 100,000, but more likely to be up to 180,000. That is huge. So the community is growing. People are thinking, I could maybe do something different. It could maybe look like this, and wanting different things, and trying to make that happen. So, you know, thank you for sharing your story. Really grateful. And I hope, you know, being Cornish too, I hope we get to meet up in person at some stage. That would be really nice.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I do hope our paths cross.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today, and hopefully be nice really to kind of touch base maybe in a year's time when you've done a year, and just see how things have changed and how your journey went.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You take care, and stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
If you've got any stories that you would like to share, or anything that you would like us to cover, drop us a line at hello@collageapp.co.uk. And until next time, keep calm and enjoy the journey.